again. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you for having us here today to discuss some details on the mega site planning and some things moving forward. Obviously, we've talked about this for a long time, so I'm not going to stand up here and rehash details about how we got where we are now. But we do, as detail, we are in the process of planning the developing the construction plans for the sites. We have acquired property. We have dug test pits for soils at the sites. Vance can probably provide some more detail on that. So we are in the process of continuing to plan this. I do want to hand out this spreadsheet I've got here that details the expenses that we have incurred for these sites through today, which Vance says he actually does have another invoice that I don't have yet, so there will be a little bit added to this. But this is the total cost that I have been able to identify up until today. So I want to hand this out and just see if y'all have any questions at this point. I'll be tripping over everything.
Thank you.
Again, these detail any items related to the design process of the sites, the land acquisition process, and just like I said, the test pit excavation is really the only thing that has been performed after we have acquired the property. So if y'all have any questions about this, I'll be glad to field those now before we turn it over to Vance for where we stand at this point. So seeing none, we have Mr. Vance Moore here today. I believe he's also got some of his employees staged with teams possibly. So I'm going to turn it over to him to kind of discuss where we are in the plant and the design process and the needs going forward, and we'll go from there. Mr. Vance.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Is in regards to the team stuff, that's if we get further than I anticipated. I got a little backup to give me some more information that I may not have brought here specifically. Could answer a question that I may not have with me right now. But just as a recap, I believe the last time that I was here showing concepts and all, if my memory is correct, was June of 2022, where we kind of went through different options and said, this is the option that we like. And so we built on that since selecting sites and such. And what I'd like to do is share the concept as it stands today, give you a little bit of an explanation of the layout. So yeah, now that's up there. If you can notice what's on the screen now, I can zoom this up to however it works for you, but can you see the cursor moving on the screen? That's the main thing. So this site is the Stilley Station site, which is on the south side of the river. This, in the bottom of the page, is Stilley Station Road. North would be almost directly heading right of the page. So it's not oriented north up, so I don't make you aware of. So what we have is the entrance on the far left-hand side of the page would be the entrance to the facility. So the way a customer would access it is driving in here, make this right turn, drive down to what I'm calling the cul-de-sac area, come back into the site, unload, exit the facility. So that's the concept of this. So a few of the major features on this is that this area here is what we're calling the wet pond area. That will provide a lot of the stormwater management for the site, but more importantly, it's going to provide the soil material needed to build up the elevated site. So you may recall that what we're having here is a retaining wall type facility where we have a customer area that's about 5 feet higher than the service area. Then we have an additional 3.5 foot high wall serves as the barrier to load over top of into the containers. So if you look in this area, that's where the containers and the walls would be up in here. And we can zoom up for more detailed questions here in a little bit. We have incorporated into this design was what we call a multi-material facility. That's for materials that you wouldn't necessarily put into containers. Think of TVs, think of paint, other materials that aren't just dumped into a container to be hauled for disposal. That facility will have both a truck loading dock type thing where you back up, it could walk directly, load the truck directly. We also have something that you probably have not seen. This long feature here is where a service truck, one that would pick up containers, is able to back up a ramp up to the elevation that the customers would be located. So they're backing up a ramp up the elevation. But that's for if you ever wanted to put a container like we have at these sites, but something that would be loaded with some kind of material that needed to be collected up in that area. The truck could back up and get to it without having to interact with the customer or the user of the facility. The white shaded area down here would be where we would process yard waste dropped off at the facility, and something that you may not be familiar with is the way the concept has yard waste where the customer does not unload out of a vehicle, trailer, whatever, above and over a wall. But what they'll do, if you can visualize that, they'll have what they're driving on, and there'll be a break with a sloped concrete pad. It's the intent, and the customer can back up. Now they'll have stops where they, shouldn't drive down the slope, but they can unload yard waste directly out of the back of the vehicle onto the ground, and then the operator can manage that material with a front end type loader where he can drag the material down towards this white area, and that's where that material will be ground on site. So that's one of the features.
And that was one of the reasons we had heard a lot of folks say that they weren't happy with the guardrails that we had to have up to keep folks from falling into the dumpsters because they want to be able to back their pickup truck up and shove all the stuff off the back. And it's kind of hard to do that when you're backing up to a bollard or backing up to a wall and trying to push over because of that stuff. So when we talked about that, Vance's idea was, well, if we put a brake in there, then you can just walk up and you can just sweep your truck out and it goes on the ground, and then we manage it off the ground. So made it a little more convenient, was an option for folks that we thought would solve the issue that we have right now that people are not happy about.
So what this site is also intended to do is to serve as a storm debris management site. Storm debris is it's not your normal leaves and limbs and things that you clean up on the weekend. This would be a massive, type hurricane, tornado type event where you would do some kind of emergency management of that debris, storm debris. And so what we have is this facility, you see this purple line going around up here towards the top of the page. That is property that has been acquired at this site, and it is bisected by a stream and associated wetland feature. So it sort of divides it in half, but we have very large areas up here where storm materials can be managed. And we're showing the proposed access stormwater features that would be required to utilize those features. I think that kind of goes over generally what, each facility, both of them, when I say both sites, we're intending to have a facility on Stilley Station Road in the south part of the county and North Boyd Road on the north side of the river. The facilities, as far as the convenience site, should be almost identical. The difference being that the North Boyd site will not also have a storm management part of it. That activity will continue to happen at the current White Post facility. So this is the current layout. This is the North Boyd site. Again, north is pointing towards the right-hand side of the page. As you see this road here, that's North Boyd. I believe I believe that is in the direction you're heading from 264 towards, what's the name of it? Yeah, that way. Yes, but we have the entrance over here towards the top right-hand side of the page. Same kind of a deal where the customer would come in, circle, and that's where the unloading would happen. So what this takes advantage is the stacking that can happen internal to the site, so you're not stacking people out on the highway. There's plenty of stacking on the inside the site to prevent people from not being able to get off the highway. But generally, everything is pretty consistent between the two sites. There's been a few adjustments just for the site constraint features. Real quick, maybe I will, let me pull up, we did a couple of test pits out there, and I just wanted to show you some pictures. They went down over 10 feet. What was amazing that it's hard to tell which test pit is from which site. I mean, they were so similar, they looked almost identical on both sides. It's really shocking to me. What we were anticipating is a very shallow groundwater. And we dug 10 plus test pits on each site and did not encounter water in the bottom of them. What we did encounter, however, if you look at the top of this test pit, you'll see that there's a thick organic mat at the top. And to build on this structurally, that has to be removed. And one of the things that was not anticipated prior to doing this was the amount of material that would have to be removed in order to start putting fill on top of it. So that 2 foot of material has to be removed and not used, and then good material has to be brought back to replace it and then build up to the elevation that you ultimately want to go to. So due to that, we have more earthwork quantities than we had anticipated. Back in the day when we were talking to you, as I mentioned, the elevated part of the site's about 5 feet above the surrounding ground. And we had done our estimates based on the 5 foot thick area. This is going to require more. Not only will it be where you fill above, but anywhere you're going to build a road or anywhere that is going to have improvements, that material is going to have to be removed. So that was, and it's on both sites. It's very consistent. So, well, the on-site material that's removed and not used will be stockpiled. It will probably be really good, high organic material. But right now, we would just, we're accounting for it just to be stockpiled, stabilized, in a pile on site. Now it has value. We have not decided where that will go by any stretch. But there's going to be a significant amount of material that will be stockpiled. So as I go back to the 2 different sites, we were talking about it. There's been some changes. We talked about the yard waste, how we added a concrete pad. We've added some there was a lot of discussion last time I was here. I want to make the site expandable. And that makes sense. And something we're going to talk about here is going to be critical here in a minute, but this layout that I'm showing you for both sites contains the ability to put 12 containers on the backside of the wall. Now, when we had presented the concept before, there were 7 containers on the backside of the wall. So this is more containers. If you But these are the container numbers and the intended material to be handled in those. So this will handle many materials at this facility. Just wanted to make sure that was clear. So the way this process went was we kind of came out with the concept of, how we're going to do the traffic and how we're going to do the walls and so forth and so on. Then we went in and found sites that were suitable for it. Then we put these facilities on the sites, made changes, made adjustments and all like that. Then I'd say November timeframe, started talking about, all right, got a schedule when we would like to put this out potentially for contractors to provide bids. Part of that, we started doing the bid tabulation sheets, which identifies items, quantity, and then we went above and beyond that and started putting what we would consider to be reasonable unit prices on all those, and came out with an estimate and started sharing that with the staff. And I think that one of the things that came out was, holy cow, that's a lot more than I thought it was going to be, was the general consensus. So what I would like to do is talk to you about what we've been doing about the last 30 days, some of the talk and analysis, and maybe get some guidance on it. So what you'll see here is a typical, it would be a bid tab if it was not filled out, but it's a bid tab that we have filled out with our best estimate on what unit prices should be, and have come out with what the total dollar figure would be. Now, one thing, the way you'd look at it is, let's just say you're at item 5, silt fence. There's 1,375 LF means linear feet. We estimate it will cost the contractor, or they would charge you $4 a foot to put it in. That means silt fence is going to cost $5,500. We do this for every item in the whole bid. Sum it up. Over on the right-hand side, what that percentage is, that line item constitutes that percentage of the total bid. So what that does, you start going down and you see all these 1 and 0.5, 0.8. You get down here and you say, well, number 12, excavation, that's 9% of the job. Excavation and backfill, earthwork. It's a big item. So whatever number we put in there has a huge influence on the cost. Now, this is something that's not, we're basing this on jobs that have been done. We use all kinds of resources to come up with this unit price here, the $6. But what it costs somebody to do work in Charlotte may not be the same as it costs in Beaufort County and vice versa. The size of the project, how many yards are being moved, how easy is the site to navigate, all influences this. So, but I think we've done our best effort to come up with these unit prices. We've had a lot of input from a lot of people to come up with this, but again, we're not contractors. We're giving you our best estimate of what these would cost. And you can go in and do sensitivity analysis on this. Well, if this changes, how much does that move the needle? So I feel confident that we've been pretty good on this in our line of work on these estimates. But there is no guarantee. It all depends on how many contractors perceive this as being competitive, or do they feel like I've got no competition, it can change this. So I just caution you on that is that what I can control is the quantity that's on the job. I cannot control the cost somebody will install it for or buy it for. Does that make sense? So getting to the end result, what we got was I put together, and this is not going to be shown, but if you go through all these items, get down to the bottom, well, originally what we had is we're going to build everything that I just showed you on that plan. Every building, every concrete pad, everything was going to get built. And I'll just jump to the bottom. And it said that site, for instance, without any storm debris stuff, just the convenience site, was going to be $3.9 million. Everybody went, whoa, time out, you know. So what we tried to do, we went to step 2, and we said, just based on me, this is more me and less staff just trying to say, now, there are things that I call necessary to operate the facility. And there's things that are nice if you have it. Let me give you an example. We have shown that where the customer unloads the material would have a shed built over top of it. It's nice. Not every facility has it. The ones we have now don't have it. So the question is, what I tried to do on this is say, well, if you build everything from items 1 through 34, you can open up the site and you can operate it. All right? Everything on the bottom is, you can kind of see what the premium is to add these other items and say, well, that's, you know, for what that's going to do, I'd like to have that. So we're looking at this as an alternate. Maybe you can bid all these as an alternate and choose which ones you want or don't want, depending on the price that you get for them. So that's the concept. Then, so that gets you 2.8 million for the, let's call it the basic. And then you'll see some stuff in here where we talk about supplemental lighting. So concept. Concept will be, we can have shelters over top of each of the unloading areas. Each one of those will have lights underneath it shining on the unlighting area. And then when you're driving in from the DOT road up to and along the whole cul-de-sac, you've got poles like light poles that are in the city driving down the road, and the roads are lit up the whole way. It's not necessary to have that. It is certainly nice. It's a premium. But what we're saying is up top may have item 33, what I call minimal lighting. That would, in concept, think of that as the pole with the spotlight on top of it, kind of floodlighting the whole area. You know, it kind of lights it, but it isn't lighting the driveway coming in the whole way. It's not giving you a light directly over each unloading area. And then supplemental lighting down at the bottom would be, what's the premium to add a whole bunch of poles and a whole bunch of lights? Now, just short of this, what we haven't done is we have not hired the electrical subcontractor to put all this together because we have not, this costing thing came up. We want to give some guidance on what we would get a design for. It's different to do the basic versus the ultimate. And so we have solicited proposals from electrical designers, and we are waiting to act on them depending on direction from this meeting. But what I'm trying to convey is this is a thought process as far as, direction. I like this, I'm willing to pay for it, or that's too much. We got to find another solution. That's the dialogue I'm searching for. So I'm trying to go through the thought process of how we went down there. Now, one of the things that you will see is, you heard me say earlier, the concept that we originally gave you had 7 containers. This one has 12. Well, each one of those has to have 8.5-foot retaining wall along the entire length of it, all the concrete associated with that. The pad that that container sits on is a big, thick concrete pad with rebar and so forth in it. It costs money to build those pads. So the question is, you've got 12, you may not need 12 ready to go operate day one. You know, it may be we just build enough to operate day one with 8 stalls. That gets us going. And then as things grow and so forth, and years down the road, hey, we've got a lot going on. Let's add 2 more, let's add 4 more stalls. That's an option. Just trying to give you a thought process. So this estimate, what it's trying to do in the bottom is that in the base bid up top, it is saying that we are building 8 pads for the container to sit on. One of the problems that is it's very hard under this concept to just build the vertical retaining wall for 8 walls and build future retaining wall for the additional 4. So this is building the retaining wall for 12 containers, but not building all the infrastructure to make it ready to use. So what you're coming up with, just bear with me, this is going to come to fruition, I hope, if I did my job, is that it's saying, for easy math, building a 12 container capable site, but not building all that's necessarily to make it operational today. Let's call that, without contingencies and all like that, that's a $2.8 million project. Now, we went further and said, what if we modify, this is a revised figure that I'm showing here with 8 containers. Let's just say this is just out of whack altogether, don't want to talk about it. What would an 8 site, and that's all I'm ever going to have out there, what would it cost me with the same concept? And so we've got cost in here, and we can definitely talk about that same concept, except that when you go to the bottom, I mean, if you go to the difference between these cost estimates, one of them has enough retaining wall to build 12, and one of them has enough retaining wall to build 8, and that's it. You don't come in and expand it in the future. It's not feasible to come in and do that down the road, in my opinion. You also have a little bit less dirt because you got a less length of that wall, and you could almost consider it like taking a slice out of the middle of the cake and pushing 2 cakes together. You know, we removed the dirt out that was the center of the cake when we shoved it together. So there's less dirt in this for an 8 container facility. Doing the same thing, same concept. Let's call it comparing basic to basic. 2.5 million. And I think a while ago I told you the basic 12 was 2.8 million. So it's a $400,000 question. Easy math that we're asking. Is $400,000 premium now worth it to you to have the ability to have a 12 stall facility down the road or not? That's what we're trying to identify for you, is the premium, but you know, what that buys you, you know, flexibility wise. And here more or less to say, is that price worth it to you? And we're getting beyond my pay grade to answer those. So I think that is really some of the reasons that we're here, is to talk about, maybe create a dialogue on, are we barking up the right tree here and proceed, or do we need to stop and let's rethink this thing a little bit? So with that, I'm going to pause and see what kind of questions we have and then see what kind of direction. Yep.
Y'all should recall that the $2.5 million was the price that was thrown out several times in the past couple of years. But I do want to point out that that last figure that Vance showed, the 2.5, did not include things like the multi-material facility or the shelters over the things where previously we thought that that would be included as well. So if we were to leave out something like the multi-material facility, that would impact our plans as far as what we were planning to collect, because, you know, currently, electronics and white goods are collected on our sites in roll-off containers. Well, those would be collected under that multi-material facility and packaged for transport under that facility under this plan. So if we don't build that facility, some of those plans may have to change a little bit about how we were collecting some of those materials that we currently collect now in a different manner. So I did want to point that out, that that was also an item not included in that price.
So what I think I would read this as, is if we can go back, if it shows it on the screen. And we have what I call basic versus premium. Premium would include every building, every concrete, everything in there. So that's the ranges that we're working at. You may not want everything, is the point. So that's how we're trying to compare what size facility, the flexibility that you want to have down the road. You know, is it a one size fits all for both sides of the river? All those kinds of questions. And I think I wanted to just to start a discussion and just see where that went. That was my goal.
Well, I'd like to see how we're going to get into those slots. Getting in and getting out as quick as possible will make the difference for me as far as 8 or the 12. And if we can get in and get out quickly, I think we can get by with 8. But I'm not really clear. I mean, if I'm not really good at backing trailers, and I'm at the head of the line trying to back a trailer, am I going to block everybody from getting in there?
No, so there's been a lot of discussion. I mean, everybody that knows that I've been doing this, I don't want to back up. That's what everybody says. You're losing a lot of efficiency by not backing up. That's the first thing I'll tell you. So let's just review this one more time. So if you can see the cursor, incoming would be in this northern or topmost lane. Would go around, turn, then you have a second topmost lane, which I'm calling a bypass lane. Any vehicle that is backed up, trailer, not trailer, will not extend out to that bypass lane. Got a long distance between the wall back here and that lane. You have an access lane, which means we're going to have signs that say, this is this material, and I'm looking out, and they're going to pull off out of the bypass lane so people can go freely. That's where I pull off, stop, back up into. So the access lane is where you're pulling off of it's almost considered like a turn lane. You know, that's the way I would look at it. And you're backing up to the wall so that the trailer would be, or the back of the vehicle. You're not driving straight in. So your question would you be blocking? You would not be blocking. You got a lot of room to maneuver out here. This is the way this thing is set up.
Also, the idea behind the 12 containers versus the 8 containers is not necessarily more space for the same items, but different items. Do we in the future decide we're going to start accepting C and D? That allows space for that service. Where if we have 8 containers, we're basically accepting what we accept right now and nothing else, because there is no room for other items. The 12 offers the opportunity for expansion.
One more question about storm debris. I know the storm debris that I have will have branches and leaves and shrubs that you'll take, but it'll be mixed in that will be pier parts. What do you do about that?
To me, a pier part is a construction demolition material. It's not a storm debris. Storm debris is supposed to include non-treated material, limbs, leaves, but mostly they are limbs and such, tree trunks, is storm debris. Yard debris is different than storm debris. So I would just make sure we're keeping all those different categories. Storm debris would occur in very limited direct response events. You would not be operating a storm debris site routinely. It would be an exception when you're operating storm debris. Yard waste would be operated routinely when the facility is open. I guess that's the best way to explain it. Storm debris, you would not be allowing treated type material. Either your public would be sorting it or your contractor would, and you'd be paying for it.
I think on the south side Stilly Station site, you know, that additional area, which, let me also point out, was not included in the pricing, correct? Would be a temporary storm debris site, similar to what we have set up in a couple of different areas now. There's a couple in Aurora now. The Beaufort County landfill is one where the material comes in. It's, whether it's residents bring it or it's a bad enough event where it's picked up roadside and it's separated on the roadside and hauled in separate, there would be space for either or in that facility.
I have cost stuff here ready to talk about storm debris. There's the roads that get to the fields. There is the prepping of the field so that they are ready to accept said storm debris, which means, what does prepping mean? You have to clear, you have to grub it, and you have to make it so that you can drive on it and it can process material on top of it, which means you're putting some kind of a surface down. It's expensive. You saw that this site was bisected by a stream. Well, that means that we're going to have to put some type of a crossing across said stream. Then we've talked about what design storm is going to be required for that crossing to pass safely without overtopping or washing away. And if you start looking at this site, it's a tremendous drainage area going on through this creek, but it's not a really big drain. So it's kind of counterintuitive. So you could spend a lot of money just building the crossing to go from one side of this. Do you want all that up and ready and available day one? So before we got into it, we were going to show you, and we can get into it whenever, what that could potentially cost you to have a site so that if you got a hurricane next week, open it up and it's ready to go. It's a lot of money to do what I just described.
When you said about the 8 container facility and the 12 container facility, and you didn't say this, but I'm speculating that you're talking about having the 8 container on the south side and the 12 container on the north side based on traffic.
I know I didn't jump that far, but yes, that's exactly the question, or vice versa. Because you may say, I've already got sites on the north side that I don't have on the south, or plans. The whole point was wanting to make sure we're considering all that needs to be considered at this time before we go forward and lock this down.
And how cost effective do you think it would be if you went ahead and did the 12 versus waiting, then adding maybe one year and one the next year? I think that increases the cost a lot more than just doing it all at once. If you went from 8 to 12 and you did one the next year, then one the next year, because we all know prices change.
Yeah.
And they change rapidly.
Well, I'm saying in our estimating, it's purely a mathematical exercise that we did. I didn't try to get into what it will cost you down the road. All I was saying is if you didn't build it now, it would cost you about $400,000 less, was that example. Now, we had a lot of things going on here, and we may be mixing and matching too. I know there's a lot of numbers in all that I'm throwing at you. So we had one of them that was a 12 container abled property, let's call it that way, of which in the basic part of the cost, you only made 8 of them functionable fully to be ready to go day one. The premium part, what I call the additive, was at the bottom. And what it did, it had a line item for adding 4 concrete pads additionally for those. And it said that's what it would cost you to add those day one. And that's really the exercise that's going on. It's not as complicated as now and in the future and so forth and so on. The main point I'm trying to make is if you build the 12 capable, you can add to it later. If you say, no, 8 is all we're going to do, expanding it to 12 down the road is going to be very impractical and much more cost to add it if you chose to do it. There's probably a way. If there's a will, there's a way, but it will cost you a lot more than doing it day one. I'll tell you that. That may be a roundabout way of answering that question.
Well, I mean, I take an overall of what are we really trying to do? We're trying to have a facility that a person that wants to deliver, and it's going to be a longer drive than what it's been being, and he wants to take his trash to the facility right now. Okay, it's beginning to get dark. It's the time of the year that it's beginning to get dark. So we're going to shut this thing down from daylight to daylight. That gets me into the better lighting part of this thing. Go ahead and do the better lighting now. The canopies, I figure the canopies work this way. You've got a 15-mile drive to take the stuff, your trash off and get back home. And you're looking at the weather, and they don't have canopies over this place. So are you going to wait a day or two or have the inconvenience of not being able to drop your stuff off? So put the canopies in if you're trying to make a facility that's going to do what you want it to do. You're spending all of this money. Make it so the person's going to say, well, I know I can get rid of this stuff if I can unload it in the rain because I got a canopy. And I've got lighting because it's getting dark. It's late in the day. I just finished work. I'm getting ready to take my trash off. So when I get there, I'm going to have good lighting, so I'll be able to see what I'm doing. I don't think shortcutting this stuff and trying to get by with less is the answer to it. It is called a convenience site for a reason, and it needs to be convenient for people to get in there and to use it. When you look at 8 versus 12 dumpster places to put the stuff into, there can be an advantage to whoever is doing your hauling and your tipping to having 12 on there. And that can save you money down the road because right now, if they're having to dispatch and, oh, gee, everything's full down there and we built this thing to the bare minimum, we put 8 in and it should have taken more, and now you've got a contractor who's going to charge you more money because he has to have dispatchers and he has to rush truck in there to get rid of this thing. It's called a convenience site for a reason. So put the 12 units in if you're going to build this and do a first-class job for the public. And I think it will put you in a real good negotiating position insofar as whoever's going to do your tipping, because then you will be able to get some better prices because I don't have to have a truck ready and run and be up against it and charge these people this money for this because it's a convenience site. They got more space, more things down there than they need. I can put a truck on the yard that's going to do nothing but drag dumpsters out of the way and put another one in if it gets to that point. And then I don't have to run to do this, which means he's not going to charge you a lot of money for the kind of service he's giving you. The convenience part of this thing is the thing that makes it work. So if you're going to do it first class so that the first day that it's open, it can be useful. And I don't have a problem with going ahead and fixing the site for hurricane stuff to begin with. Now you are ready for a hurricane. Now, You need to be aware in our zone, in Atlantic hurricanes, if you pull up the hurricane maps and you look at hurricane tracks for over a 50 or 60-year period of time, what you're gonna see is that hurricanes, and this surprised somebody that's very dependent on what happens to him with a hurricane, Paul Sproul, and I was telling him this. Paul, have you looked at the hurricane maps? What you're gonna see is you go for 20 years without getting hit with a hurricane. And then all of a sudden, you get hit with 4 or 5 a year for another 5 or 6 years. That's the way it works, because hurricanes are guided based upon weather patterns. And it depends on when the high is coming across from Oregon as to where your hurricanes are gonna go this year. And once you get into the cycle, you're gonna stay in that cycle for a season or two. And then when the cycle changes, you're gonna be into a different cycle. So you may be building something for hurricane debris that you're not gonna use for another 20 years. But go ahead and build it now, rather than having to wait until you actually needed it. Why didn't we do this a long time before we need it? I mean, it's a convenience site. So it needs to be convenient.
Don't let this out, but I agree with it.
I understand what Mr. Richardson said, go ahead and build it to full capacity. But the question that I have we looked at the study where the populous areas are? Now, I mean, if you got one on the Board Road, is that half of the population, or the one over on the Steeler Road, is that half of the population? So to me, would it make sense to put 12 in an area that the population wasn't there, or 12 where the population was, or just do both of them identical? That's the only question I have.
I don't know if I can answer your question as far as the analysis of the population. I think it was more of a distribution of distance anybody would drive. It was trying to be centroid of geographic areas more than population areas. I did not do an analysis of, what population is within what radius at what size. I did not do that.
We tried very hard to make it where it was almost equidistant for anybody in the county to reach these sites. And we, east to west, obviously, north to south, on the north side and the south side a little bit, you're closer that way, but to make it fair for everybody to access the site, because the thought process of taking less materials at the outlying sites after these are open, so that everybody could come to the one spot and no one person would have to drive, farther than the same person on the other side of the county. I understand what you're saying about the population, and certainly that was, in our thought process. One thing that I can say about that is Washington has the transfer station. So while we don't push that out there a lot as an option, take your waste to the transfer station, because most people don't want to go there for their vehicles and everything. That is an option if something pops up. Right now, if somebody calls up and says, I've got a lot of waste I need to get rid of. I'm a resident, I've got a lot of waste. We don't necessarily want them to go to the collection sites, because that's just more waste in the bin that has to be trucked back to the transfer station. So we kind of encourage them to go to the transfer station. So Washington and Chocowinity residents, that, while everyday use probably not the best thing for the residents, that is an option that helps out in the little bit larger population areas.
I concur with Hood. Try to get as good a deal as we can on this, but don't scrimp. Like Hood was talking about with the lights and the covers. What if everybody goes at the same time, because it's a fair day and you've got more light that day? You're getting later in the season. We're not being efficient or effective. The best idea is, of course, to
be able to let people go when they want to go, and maybe there'll be some spatiality between folks using the site. Talking about the debris, I really would at some point like to be able to grind that debris up, if at all possible, and turn it into mulch.
So the yard waste material,
Yes.
that's the stuff that's every day. I think that is the intent with these pad areas, is to, if you can, I'll zoom out a little bit, but, so this white, this pad area here is to windrow and to grind the material that's delivered to the site. That's the intent of those, to be there.
Which, we grind the material we have now, and we do have to truck it off-site because of the regulations that we have. But as far as mulching, a lot of that has to do with the quality of the material that comes into the site. If we were just receiving branches and, tree trunks and things like that, mulch would be wonderful. But the leaves and the grass clippings and all of the other, the small waste that just turns into mush when it gets wet, that kind of degrades the material that you would take away from the site if somebody was coming to get mulch.
It's all compost, though.
Yeah, mulch, compost, two different things. Compost is a lot more intensive of a process than creating mulch. So, could we do it? Yes, there would be, additional expense on top of what we do now.
Well, maybe we can sell it.
So would this yard waste be bagged? People come up with bags, or they come up with just tarp stuff and raking it out?
Well, people could bring it in how they wanted to. If they had plastic bags, they would not need to leave plastic bags because this is material that's ground up and then turned around and used taking, for example, what we do right now, this material is ground up, hauled away, and used as either daily cover at a landfill facility, so they wouldn't want a bunch of plastic bits flying around at the landfill, or also as fuel for like an incinerator plant, so they wouldn't want plastic. Now, the paper yard waste bags probably wouldn't be that big of a deal, but the plastic would not be allowed to be dropped with yard waste. Yes.
Yeah, if they came that way, but if they came in a big container and just dump it.
Yeah, I think most
that would be
people would
great.
just have it in
Just
the back
tarp
of their
it.
truck and they'd sweep it out.
Yeah.
I have facilities that people will collect it and transport it in a bag. When they get there, they have to rip it, pour it out, throw the bag into the trash. So they're not leaving a bag full of leaves. They're actually ripping it up and pouring it out of the bag, taking the bag over and throwing it where they would throw their household garbage.
What kind of staff you need to run this place, and what kind of specialized equipment do you need to buy over and above what you're going to be putting in there, like, I don't know, forklifts or something?
So what we've done through the planning process is we have, while, we believe that these facilities would be better off staffed with county employees. Obviously, we don't have county employees to staff these sites. So we've kind of taken the route that I would say we're anticipating it would be contract employees. Again, we would hope to come back later and maybe change that. But I think we're anticipating no less than 3 employees on site because let's face what we have now. We have sites that need more than 1 person now, but we only have 1 person. These sites need 2 people handling the container area, and then there needs to be somebody responsible for the yard waste area, or, one at the yard waste, one at the multi-material facility, one at the container area. They'd have to shift around to cover the proper areas. So 3 people, ideally, I think is what we're anticipating would make these function best. As far as equipment goes, are you talking about like compactors and things like that? Or like forklifts and things like that? Right. So, another one of not the base items in the bid was a equipment shelter. We anticipate each of these sites if it's a contractor operating it, they would be responsible for staging a backhoe or a front loader or something that would be that would help manage the yard waste. As far as like a forklift, it would probably be helpful, but, you know, I think a lot of what we would be doing could also be pallet jacks, kind of to be determined in that multi-material facility. But there would be a piece of equipment there for yard waste management, because people will be dropping their waste on that slope. They've got to pull that away and move it into the staging area.
And just to speak to that just a minute too, remember, part of this also is the closing of some of our current convenience sites. So on balance, you may be okay, you're gonna need 3 people, but we're gonna close a couple sites. So those folks that are there are gonna be able to move over, because my anticipation is it'll be a contract basis. Not to shortcut the conversation, but I think what I've generally heard from the board is build it and build it right to start with. So let's talk money. If you're ready to move forward, and right now, it's all academic until we get bids back. I mean, until the bidders look at it, like Vance said, until they determine whether they got some competition, whether they need the work, whether they want the work, it's all academic. It's whatever Vance has conjured up and tried to figure out from other stuff. So we really don't know what the final number is going to be until we put it on paper and have the bidders come back with it. So, you know, we think we got a decent estimate. But Anita's put some stuff together to talk about finances. I think you have it. Yes, sir, sorry.
Brian, I agree. I think we should go ahead and go with the premium. Try to do it right the first time. One of the points you've made about the organic matter that's on there, I think that in the bid process, if we can get the right people to take a look at it, the ideal thing, because we got some innovators right here in Beaufort County, that if they haul it off-site, it'll never be stored there, which, you know, I think that's one of the things that we may be putting in there, you know, too much money for. It's just a matter of finding the right group that wants to do it.
You just gave me the feedback that I was talking about. From the standpoint is it valuable to you to have a stockpile of it out there you may have a future use for? I don't know what that would be.
I think we got people, users that sell it, that would go ahead and put it on their site, and they would bag it and process it, and you know, whether they would pay or whether they would just remove it for some nominal fee.
So what I'm trying to get out of this, and you are providing me the feedback, we're trying to set up a bid process that leaves some flexibility. So the whole reason that we're organizing it the way it is that the additives can be picking and chosen by you once you see the price. If they're in there and they say build it regardless, it becomes much harder to negotiate what your price is going to be to pull this big item out, and not, because they're spreading costs all over these items. You pull one of them out, it could affect other ones. So what I want to clarify, there is, you will build me everything, regardless. You know, there is no, I get to choose to add to it because I saw the price and I want it all. Or you set it up so they came back, here's the prices, tell me how many check marks you want to put beside these things because you want them all. But you choose the check marks or not, based off the prices you see. That's what I'm really looking for, is how we're going to take this bid and be able to present it to you to make those choices. That make sense?
Yes. Okay, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, I think that just makes sense from a board's perspective. You say, let's build it right, let's build it right the first time. But to Vance's point, you don't know what those numbers are going to be. And it's best to go into the bidding process where you can say, here are alternates, because then the contractors, when they're bidding it, they'll set that aside separately. And if you go in with a total bid and say, I want you to pull that out, you're never gonna get the amount that was really put in there. You know, they're always gonna fudge on that. So it sounds like to me what y'all are looking for is, yes, build it right, but let's have some flexibility, like Vance said, to be able to say, okay, maybe that was too much, we don't wanna do that. And you just need that flexibility, I think. Does that sound appropriate? Instead of just saying, give me the whole ball of wax and whatever it is, it is.
I would
you were-
recommend that. That would be my recommendation, if it means anything.
You and Anita gonna talk about the funding part of it?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So everybody's got two handouts in front of you from me. The first one I just wanted to mention is a schedule of the ARPA funding. That remains available. That amount is $852,727. So that has not been spoken for or appropriated. And also, I'll remind you that at our last meeting, Christina presented her item on the SCADA replacement. And we originally had a budget of $700,000 using ARPA funds for that. And I believe she was able to secure some grant funding for some of the districts replacing their part of the SCADA system, and that new price has been reduced to about $200,000. So I expect we'll be able to add $500,000 back to that $852,000. So we're looking at about $1.3 million available still in ARPA funding. So I just bring that to your attention in case you decide that you want to use any of that funding for this particular project we're talking about tonight.
Well, there is some talk that the federal government is gonna cut this ARPA designations off if the money's not used, and I think we need to go ahead and use it and get rid of it.
Okay, let me just explain here. So we've used it as far as the federal government is concerned. So just to remind you how all that worked, we were able to claim revenue replacement for the full $9,128,000 as far as the federal government is concerned. We showed that we spent all that on public safety, salary, and benefits. And then what we did internally was we kind of moved that money aside and said, here's the $9.128 million. How do y'all want to spend that free money we got from the government? Okay, but we've satisfied our requirement as far as the federal government goes in spending those funds.
Yeah, so they're not able to claw any of that money back. We've satisfied them.
I'm glad you refreshed me on that. I remember that now, but I think we just go ahead and use the money and close out the fund and get it over with.
That's certainly your option. I will talk to you about the second little schedule you got there. So I was asked to put together a funding recommendation on how we'll pay for these mega sites once we move forward. And hearing what I've heard tonight on your decision to move forward with more of a premium site, we'll be looking at those top numbers there and about an $11 million total project for the two sites. So the solid waste fund has about $1.1 million in fund balance, definitely not enough money to pay for this project outright. So we have the option of borrowing the money from the bank. But what I would recommend we do is we borrow the money from ourselves and pay ourselves back the interest. And the way we would do that is, and I know Commissioner Richardson loves to make fun of the different pots of money, but I'm gonna talk about a few different pots of money. If you look down near the bottom of that schedule, so you might remember that we had a surplus above the 35% target goal of the general fund balance about 3 or 4 years ago. And I remember Commissioner Rebholz was the commissioner that made the recommendation that we set aside, I believe it was $5.6 million, and move it from the general fund to the facility capital reserve to bring our target general fund balance to the 35% number, and that's what we did. So now, because we took that action several years ago, we have a balance of $5,719,023 in a facility capital reserve fund sitting there that can be used. We also have a strong financial balance for our general fund balance of $28,133,806. And this is, as of June 30th, 2025, from the audited financials that I just received last week. So as far as a percentage of our expenditures on that, so remember, we've got that 35% target. So our financials, when they're released, it'll show that our fund balance in general fund available is 34%, okay? But that is of a total expenditure number of $83 million, which is inflated last year because we did a $10 million transfer to the schools for the grant, okay? Or to the building fund, not to the schools, to the building fund for the grant. So our normal annual general fund operating expenditures are $73 million. So if I kind of correct that number, that skewed number, we really have more of a 38% fund balance number when you divide the $28,133,000 by the $73 million instead of the $83 million, okay? So once we take once we borrow $5 million from the general fund and $5 million from the facility reserve, our fund balance in our general fund will drop to 32%, which is slightly less than our target of 35%, but still a very nice, healthy fund balance in the general fund. So my recommendation would be to borrow the money from ourselves, half of it from the general fund, half of it from the facility reserve fund, pay ourselves back the interest, and finance it that way. Questions about that?
If you take the 1.1 million, and I'm not sure of my numbers here, but 1.1 million in ARPA funds, there's $1.5 million from somewhere else, there's 5.7 million in the facility reserve fund. That gives you 8.3 million. Subtract that from 11, you only need 2.7 million. Take it out of the general fund and keep on trucking.
Now, you lost me at the $1.5 million from somewhere else.
Yeah,
That
I'm
was-
not sure where that came from.
That's the ARPA, that was,
Okay, that's 1.3, or.
yeah, 1.3.
And 5.7 in facility reserve.
Okay, go back to that, 1.3 and
And
5.
5.7, that's $7 million.
Yeah, that's 7 million.
And then take that away from the 11 million.
That's $4 million
Yeah,
left.
just take the 4 million out of the general fund and keep going.
Certainly can do that.
Well, the good thing is we've got options on,
The thing that I do like about, well, let me back up. I like that, except for that this is an enterprise fund. And enterprise funds should be able to operate on their own revenues that they've generated. So you could do it. I'm not saying you can't do it, but, you know, the solid waste in the true spirit of an enterprise fund should probably borrow the money and pay it back at interest over time. You agree with that, Brian?
Yes, I mean, the whole reason for that is then you're not spending general tax dollars on this. You're allowing the solid waste enterprise fund to pay for itself. So, I mean, you can certainly do that. It's allowable, it's okay. You can give the general fund money to the solid waste fund, it's okay. But in the spirit of it being a self-sustaining, it pays for itself, business-like fund, just let them borrow it and pay it back. And you can, I'm sorry?
Except for the 1 point.
Except for
Right,
the
the
ARPA.
1.3 is
Because the
free
ARPA
money,
was money y'all have anyway.
You know,
And-
you got a scheduling issue and that you're gonna be drawing down funds probably over a 2-year period of time.
You would, and then you could set, you know, if you wanted to try to cushion that impact to the solid waste fund, because that 5 million you're gonna borrow, 4 million you're gonna borrow is gonna cause that to bump a little bit. You could cushion that by saying, okay, we're gonna spread that debt payment out. You know, you may do it 10 years, you may do it 15 years, you may do it 20, you may do it 30.
Well, what I've shown here
You-
on
you have
this
shown it
is,
on
what I've shown on our schedule is a 30-year term at 4%. The 4% is the interest earnings that we're making right now in our money market with the general fund dollars and the facility reserve. And just when you do any less than 30 years, the impact on the annual fee to make the debt service payment gets kind of rough.
Yeah,
So you can see there on that first scenario, just the annual debt service is a $29 a year impact on the annual fee. And of course, if you lower the term in years, that just drives that number up higher.
I think there's a lot of unknowns on how much money can be saved by doing what we're doing, by having the 2 mega sites and cutting back on the number of convenient sites.
Yeah, these numbers don't consider that at all.
No savings at all. That's
Yeah,
just using
I don't have
current.
those numbers. This is
Right.
kind of a worst case or a most cost it could be, I would say, as long as these estimated costs are somewhat accurate. But yes, this doesn't contemplate at all closing any of the current sites and any efficiencies that we build there and cost savings that we build there.
I mean, it's expensive when you haul tree limbs from Aurora all the way through Washington and down to Hawkins Beach Road.
And the reason we did that is we know that ultimately the board has said you're gonna close some sites. And I know there's gonna be some political pressure to not do that. So we wanted to show you the number of what it was, just in case that didn't happen.
Well, I think that's another reason that I don't think we should cut back any on what we were planning for the mega sites, because, I mean, this is a big deal for us as it relates to trying to do something that we've just been kicking down the road.
And part of that, what I've just anecdotally, what I've heard a few folks say is, well, golly day, now I'm gonna have to drive further to get rid of my yard debris. Well, that's kind of okay, because most people can actually handle yard debris themselves on their own. It's organic, it will eventually go away. You could compost it on your own yard, you could do those things with it. You can't do that with municipal solid waste. It's against law to throw it out in your backyard. So, that argument is, okay, if you want the convenience of being able to do it right now, then you may have to drive a little further, but that's organic material. You can deal with it on your own if you really want to.
Any questions of Anita?
Okay, thank you.
Have you guys got what you need, Vance? Wes? Well, Ms. Katie, you ready to adjourn? Do we need a motion, or we just adjourn? Okay, we just adjourn then. Good. Just adjourn.
Thank you, Lance.